to talk about what I call the 4 principles for self-sufficiency. Okay, these are principles that enable one to be able to achieve self-sufficiency. These are not techniques or methods. For example, grow your own food, right? You see, how to develop self-sufficiency, right? People are going to make these lists of methods or techniques, and they're very helpful, and those are obviously great things, but it kind of goes without saying that you're going to meet some of your own needs, and that's the idea of self-sufficiency. But what I'm going to talk about is 4 principles. So let's get right into it. The first principle for self-sufficiency is to be a generalist, not a specialist. And I've talked about this in previous videos. I talk about Heinlein's, specialization is for insects and different things like that, or Wendell Berry, who talks about the idea of the generalist versus the specialist. But as to be self-sufficient, you kind of have to be a generalist, not a specialist. Okay, specialization or extreme specialization is kind of the opposite of self-sufficiency, right? You are very good at one thing, maybe 2 things, and you're dependent on other people for all of the other things in life. Okay, so be a generalist, not a specialist. Be a generalist. Number 2 is be a minimalist. So then necessarily you have to develop a wide breadth of skills and capabilities, as opposed to being real deep in say one, for example. Okay, now that doesn't mean that you can't develop expertise in a couple of areas, but you wouldn't want to sacrifice the breadth of your capabilities or skills for solely being excellent or an expert at one thing. Okay, so a generalist versus a specialist. Okay, the second principle is to strive for minimalism. Okay, so explore what it means to be a minimalist. When one is a minimalist, it is much easier to be self-sufficient. Okay, now one mistake people make with regards to minimalism is that they assume that minimalism means that I basically have to live cheaply, simply, and not how I want. I have to sacrifice. But that's not it. Minimalism is really it's about a mindset. And it's about understanding, where does our need for all kinds of stuff come from, right? And there's nothing wrong with stuff, and I like stuff. But I'll give you one example. All right, I recently, I don't know, in the last several months or whatever, got rid of a lot of my clothes. Okay, I'm just using one example. I got rid of a lot of my clothes. And what I did is I basically did 80-20 analysis, and I realized that, I wear 20% of my clothes 80% of the time, right? Now, not exact numbers, but something like that. It's like relatively few items that I have, I wear most of the time. That's just the reality. So it's like, well, why do I need all these other clothes then? Well, I don't. And so part of it is this mindset, and minimalism, believe it or not, is really about an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. A scarcity mindset means we need to keep all this stuff and all this, items. We need to keep up with the Joneses and all that. And so it's really a mindset. So if you can get to a point where you explore and look at minimalism, it is so much easier to be self-sufficient. Okay, so that's the second principle, is to strive to be a minimalist. Okay, and that's you can explore it, look at try it in an area or two, and then maybe it expands to other areas of your life. Okay, so that's the second principle, which is to be a minimalist or strive for minimalism. All right, the third principle is to endeavor for simplicity instead of complexity. And we generally, if we look really close at the what we're doing and how we are currently set up, we tend to make things more complex than simple. And so in all ways, we should evaluate what we're doing and say, how can I make this simpler? Okay, how can I develop a simple system or a simple way of doing something? So one example would be our current system of food production, right? Just-in-time inventory, right? And our food is no different. Most of our food is filtered through just-in-time inventory management, right? The average food mile is 1,500 miles, right? It's this extreme complexity where there's all these, there's the farmers, there's the meat packers, there's the, the middlemen, there's the grocery stores, there's the just-in-time inventory, there's the supply chain logistics, et cetera, et cetera. It's a highly complex system. It works beautifully. When it's working, well, it works beautifully, and there's no question about it that, we don't realize how complex that system is, which of course makes it susceptible to shock, which we're seeing right now during this, pandemic experience with meat rationing, for example. Okay, so simple systems, right? Instead, a simple system is that obviously it's very simple if you were able to raise all of your own meat, or if you were able to raise a portion of your own meat and the rest of it you got from your neighbor or your network or your local area. Okay, so develop simplicity, and that will aid in self-sufficiency. No question about it. Okay, the fourth and final principle that I want to talk about today is take a systems-based approach. Okay, a systems-based approach, right? That's basically, instead of scrambling and being busy and working at, it is a systems-based approach, right? You're looking at priorities and objectives, and you're creating systems to be able to develop levels of self-sufficiency. And that will really, really help you, okay? I mean, these principles, I think, are much more important than specific techniques like grow your own food, right? That is a helpful idea, but it does not, generally speaking, get people to move the ball towards self-sufficiency. They know they need to grow their. How do they grow their own food? Well, follow these principles, right? Take these principles and be able to get you down the road towards self-sufficiency. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button for me. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think about these principles, or what principles that you follow. What's the number one principle that you think is most important?